thin as autumn leaves cut through the diner's hum. "It's you," the old woman whispered, her watery blue eyes fixed on the young waitress. "You have his eyes." Jessica Morgan froze. She'd been called many things in her shifts: honey, sweetheart, even the occasional insult, but never this. Then the woman's trembling hand brushed her sleeve. "Jennifer, my sweet girl, you've come back." The world tilted. Before Jessica could speak, the woman's eyes rolled back. Her frail body collapsed against the vinyl booth with a soft thud that silenced the entire diner. In that instant, what should have been a simple case of mistaken identity cracked open a mystery 10 years in the making, a mystery that would shatter one life and remake another. At 24, Jessica's world stretched no further than the scuffed linoleum behind the counter of the greasy spoon where she worked. Her days were measured in clattering plates, bubbling coffee pots, and the empty smiles she gave for tips. That Tuesday had begun like any other, until Walter Peterson walked in with his mother. Walter, weary and rumpled, guided the fragile woman to a booth. Her eyes, unfocused at first, suddenly locked on Jessica. It wasn't the gaze of a customer waiting for a menu. It was raw discovery, as if she'd seen a ghost. "You have his eyes," the old woman whispered again. "Robert's eyes. Green, like the woods after rain." Jessica faltered, forcing a polite smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I think you've—" But Brenda Peterson tightened her grip with surprising strength. "No, you don't understand. Jennifer, my sweet girl, they told me you were gone." The name landed like a stone in Jessica's chest. Jennifer. Her protest caught in her throat. A cold dread spread through her as Brenda's face shifted from joy to sudden terror. Clutching her chest, she gasped her daughter's name one last time, Jenny, and collapsed. He diner fell into chaos. Walter screamed for help, someone dialed 911, and Jessica stood frozen, the old woman's final words echoing in her ears. Hours later, back in her small apartment, Jessica couldn't shake it. She told herself it was just a confused old woman, nothing more, yet something deep inside her knew better. Her past had always been a blank page. Found as a toddler after a fire, she'd grown up in the foster system with no name, no family, no history. She was Jessica Morgan because someone had written it down. But who was she before? The name Jennifer haunted her. Driven by an impulse she couldn't explain, she went to St. Michael's Hospital where Brenda had been taken. Walter was there in the waiting room, his grief heavy and raw. When he saw Jessica, his pain flared into anger. "Haven't you done enough? My mother had a heart attack because of you." Jessica swallowed hard. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I just came to see if she was all right." His rage cracked, revealing something deeper. "For 10 years, he said hoarsely. "She's done this. Sees a girl who looks like her, but never like this. Never so certain." He looked Jessica in the eyes. "My daughter, Jennifer. She disappeared 10 years ago. She would be your age now." The words knocked the air from Jessica's lungs. Walter pulled a photograph from his wallet, a smiling teenage girl with freckles, long dark hair, and eyes that shifted hazel green in the light. Jessica stared, breathless. It was like looking at a younger version of herself. Walter's tone hardened. "But it can't be you." Jenny had a scar, crescent-shaped, on the inside of her left wrist. Jessica's heart slammed against her ribs. Slowly, she pushed up her sleeve. There it was, a silvery crescent she'd always been told was a burn from the fire. Walter's face went pale, his certainty crumbled into shock. The silence between them was unbearable. Back home, Jessica's thoughts spiraled. Coincidences didn't stack up like this. The name, the eyes, the scar. Her life, her entire identity, suddenly felt like a lie. She dug out an old cardboard box from her closet, the one the foster system had handed her when she turned 18. School report cards, a few faded photos, a forged birth certificate, and at the very bottom, a sealed envelope marked Personal Effects, J. Morgan. Inside were only 2 items, a smoke-stained scrap of wool blanket and a tarnished silver locket. Her hands trembled as she pried it open. Inside were 2 tiny photographs. On one side, a man with kind hazel green eyes, the same eyes staring back at her in the mirror. On the other, a young woman with dark hair, laughing as she held a baby. Jessica's breath broke. The baby was her. Tears spilled hot and fast. For the first time, she was holding proof. Proof that her life as Jessica Morgan was not the beginning, but the middle of a story she had only just begun to uncover. This was no coincidence. This was the past reaching out through fire, through loss, through 10 long years. And for Jessica, for Jennifer, it was only the beginning. Walter would have called it coincidence, but Jessica needed more. How did a girl named Jennifer Peterson, a daughter, a granddaughter, end up an unidentified Jane Doe in the foster system? Her mind leapt to her last social worker, Mrs. Carol Gable, stern, unyielding, always evasive whenever Jessica asked about her past. She'd brushed off every question with bureaucratic platitudes. Focus on the here and now, Jessica. It's what's best. Back then, Jessica thought it was indifference. Now it felt like concealment. She dug up her old case file number and called County Social Services. After an eternity on hold, the receptionist informed her that Mrs. Gable had retired 3 years ago. They could not give out her information. A dead end. Despair pressed heavy on her chest. She looked at the locket in her palm, the taita, nigh faces staring back at her, family, a grandmother lying in a hospital bed because she recognized her, a father. Could she even think of him that way? So shattered by grief he could not see the truth in front of him. She clenched her jaw. She would not let this slip away. Walter could live in denial if he wanted, but she had the scar, she had the locket, and now she had resolve. There was one more lifeline. Jessica scrolled through her phone, hesitating over a number she hadn't dialed in years. Miss Davis, one of her last foster parents, a kind, gentle woman who'd encouraged her to draw and had shown her more genuine affection than anyone else. They'd exchanged Christmas cards, nothing more. Her hands trembled as she pressed call. Hello? The voice was older now, but still warm. Mrs. Davis, it's Jessica. Jessica Morgan. Jessica, dear, how wonderful to hear from you. How are you keeping? The simple kindness made Jessica's throat tighten. I'm okay, but something's happened. Something strange. I need to ask about my file. When I first came to you, did Mrs. Gable ever say anything about the fire? About where I was found? Silence stretched. When Miss Davis spoke again, her tone was careful. It was all very hush-hush. Carol was strict about the details. She said it was for your own protection, to prevent trauma. But, she hesitated, your file was unusually thin for a Jane Doe, almost empty, just the basics. And I always thought it strange that there was no public appeal, no coverage to identify the lost little girl from the fire. That's usually the first thing they do. Jessica's heart dropped. No public appeal, no search. Why? Unless someone didn't want her family found. Unless someone already knew who she was and created a new identity instead. She remembered Mrs. Gable's eyes, the unease behind them, not indifference, fear. Meanwhile, in the dim light days, out of his study, Walter Peterson sat with a glass of bourbon, the smell of old books clinging to the air. His mother lay in the hospital, unconscious but alive. The doctors spoke in careful terms, prognosis, observation, words that danced around the truth. She was balanced on the edge of a knife. Walter had built his heart into a fortress these past 10 years. Its walls were cold facts. Jenny was gone. Hope was poison. Grief was private, orderly, final. Then Jessica Morgan had walked into that diner. He'd seen the resemblance, of course. He wasn't blind, but he had dismissed it, the way he had dismissed everything that hurt too much, until the scar. That scar had been his secret test, the one thing only his daughter would bear. He'd spoken of it almost carelessly, never imagining it would appear. And then she had pushed up her sleeve, revealing that pale crescent moon. The fortress crumbled. Hope seeped in like water through shattered stone, and it hurt. God, it hurt. To hope now felt like betrayal, a setup for devastation worse than before. But what if? He needed answers. He needed the truth, whether it destroyed him or not. Walter reached for his phone and scrolled through contacts he hadn't touched in years. He stopped at a name, Robert Finch. Finch had been the private investigator they'd hired when police gave up. Old school, relentless. He had poured years into chasing every lead only to fail. That failure had haunted him. Walter pressed call. The line rang 4 times. Finch. The voice was rough, gravelly. Robert, it's Walter Peterson. Silence, then a sigh. Walter, it's been a long time. I hope you're calling with good news, but I don't think you are. It's my mother, Walter said, voice tight. She had a heart attack today. I'm sorry. Brenda's tough. She'll fight. She's hanging on, but that's not why I'm calling. Walter's hand shook around his glass. Something's happened. Something I can't explain. I need you to look into someone for me. Quietly, off the books. And so with that phone call, the past stirred awake. The cold trail Finch once abandoned was about to burn hot again because Walter Peterson needed to know if the stranger with his daughter's eyes was truly the girl he lost, or a ghost come to haunt him. Walter had told Finch everything: his mother's collapse, the waitress with his daughter's eyes, and finally, the scar. For a long moment, the line was silent. Walter imagined Finch in his cluttered office, stroking his beard, his sharp mind already at work. "A crescent-shaped scar on her left wrist," Finch repeated. "You're sure?" "I saw it myself," Walter replied. "Her name is Jessica Morgan. She works at the Greasy Spoon." Finch's voice hardened with purpose. "All right, Walter. For Jenny, I'll dust off the old files. Give me 48 hours. Finch didn't go to Jessica directly. Instead, he traced the edges of her life. Her records were exactly what one might expect for a foster child. No relatives, a string of homes, a social security number issued at age 5. Before that, she simply didn't exist. At the diner, posing as a long-lost uncle, Finch learned she was quiet, hard-working, even artistic, sometimes sketching customers when no one was looking. She wasn't a con artist, she was simply alone. But in his garage, surrounded by cold case files, Finch uncovered something chilling. A girl vanishes in one town. Days later, a fire 50 miles away leaves behind an unidentified child survivor, age listed as 4 or 5. She couldn't speak, couldn't remember her name, and was handed over to social services. And the caseworker who sealed her file? Carol Gable. The pieces aligned too perfectly. This wasn't coincidence. It was a cover-up. Meanwhile, Jessica's days stretched endlessly. She polished the locket until it gleamed, the tiny faces inside a haunting reminder of who she might be. She couldn't wait for Walter anymore. She had to make him see. At the hospital, Walter's eyes betrayed his torment. "You're back," he said flatly. "We need to talk," Jessica replied, pulling out the locket. "This was with me when I was found. Please, look." Walter opened it. With trembling hands, inside were 2 photographs he knew by heart. His father, his wife, and the locket Jenny had never taken off. "This was hers," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know how," Jessica admitted, "but my file was almost empty. No public appeal was ever made to find my family. Carol Gable handled my case." Before Walter could respond, a nurse appeared. "Mr. Peterson, your mother is awake. She's asking for you." Walter turned to Jessica. "Come with me." Brenda Peterson lay frail but conscious. Her cloudy gaze shifted past her son and landed on Jessica. This time there was no shock, only recognition. A tear slid down her cheek. "Jenny," she whispered, her voice a prayer. Walter showed her the locket. Brenda's sob was soft but full of truth. "Robert and Lauren, you always kept it safe." With trembling hands, she reached for Jessica. The 2 women clung to each other, the weight of 10 years dissolving in their tears. At that moment, Walter's phone buzzed. "Finch." "I found her," Finch said grimly. "Carol Gable, retirement community upstate." And Walter. The Jane Doe from that fire was Jessica Morgan. The report originally listed her as 13 or 14. Someone changed it. It was deliberate. Walter closed his eyes, the truth cutting deeper than he'd ever imagined. Finch confronted Carol Gable in a faded common room that smelled of disinfectant. When he spoke Jenny's name, the color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. But Finch pressed. The intake report, the falsified age, her signature, her brittle facade crumbled. "You don't understand. The system was a disaster. My supervisor, Martin Cross, was under fire. He was desperate. We had to run away from an affluent family. He said it would be a scandal if she returned and ran away again. The press would destroy him. And then there was another. Our file, a little girl named Jessica Morgan, 4 years old. She had just died in one of our homes, but her paperwork wasn't finished. Officially, she still existed. He told me to change the age on the Jane Doe, give her Jessica's name, erase Jenny Peterson. He said the amnesia was a gift." Her hands shook as she wept. "He threatened me, said he'd ruin me. So I did it. I created Jessica Morgan, and I've lived with it ever since." The truth wasn't a monster in the shadows. It was bureaucracy, a girl erased by paperwork. The DNA test was only a formality. Jessica Morgan was Jennifer Peterson. The reunion wasn't a fairy tale. It was raw and real. Brenda's joy was overwhelming. Walter's guilt was heavy. And for Jessica, the name Jennifer felt foreign. She was still Jess, the waitress who sketched napkin portraits. The breakthrough came in the attic, where her old paintings waited beneath a dusty sheet. She didn't remember creating them, but the brushstrokes were hers. The artist had survived even if the memories hadn't. You always wanted art school, Walter said softly. That's what we fought about. I told you to be realistic. I was a fool. In that attic, the ghost of Jennifer and the reality of Jessica became one. The months that followed were fragile but hopeful. Shared meals, hesitant laughter, small steps towards something whole. And one night, staring at her reflection, Jess no longer saw a stranger. She saw her grandfather's eyes, her father's stubborn chin, and a strength all her own. Not Jessica the orphan, not Jennifer the ghost, but Jess, whole at last. What an unbelievable story of loss, identity, and the unbreakable bonds of family. For 10 years, a family mourned a daughter they thought was gone, while that same daughter lived just miles away, hidden by a terrible lie. Their story reminds us that even in darkness, hope can endure, and truth will always find its way to the light. This is Letters in the Dark.